On January 10th, 2006, behind the closed doors of a small apartment in Brooklyn, the final hours of 7-year-old Nixzmary Brown unfolded in silence and cruelty, marking the end of a life that had been slipping through the cracks of a broken system for months. To the outside world, Nixzmary was just another elementary school student in New York City, but to her teachers, she had long been a walking alarm bell. She frequently arrived at school covered in bruises, her clothes dirty, her body unwashed, and her stomach empty. Educators reported concerns again and again, documenting signs of abuse and neglect that should have triggered urgent intervention. Yet despite repeated warnings, the machinery designed to protect her failed to act decisively. Inside her home, fear ruled, and authority belonged to her stepfather, Cesar Rodriguez, whose violent discipline and obsessive control shaped every aspect of the child's daily existence. By that winter night, the violence had become routine, the suffering normalized behind walls that concealed the truth from neighbors and passersby. The events that led to Nixzmary's death began with a trivial act that no child should ever pay for with their life. According to later court testimony, the catalyst was a bowl of yogurt. Rodriguez accused Nixzmary of eating it without permission, framing the act as disobedience deserving punishment. This accusation, absurd in its simplicity, triggered a chain of violence that would last for hours. As punishment, Rodriguez forced the child into a small, unheated room that had become a familiar place of confinement for her. The room was cold, dark, and isolated, used repeatedly to break her spirit and reinforce fear. What followed went far beyond discipline. Inside that room, Nixzmary was beaten repeatedly. Witness accounts and forensic evidence later confirmed that she was struck with such force that her head slammed into a bathtub, inflicting catastrophic injuries. The assault was not brief or impulsive. It was sustained, deliberate, and relentless, carried out against a child who had neither the strength nor the ability to defend herself. Throughout this prolonged ordeal, Nixzmary's mother, Nixzaliz Santiago, was present in the apartment. Rather than intervening or seeking help, she remained passive, later admitting that she did nothing to stop the abuse. Her inaction would become one of the most disturbing elements of the case. As hours passed, Nixzmary's small body absorbed blow after blow. Hunger, exhaustion, and fear compounded the physical violence, pushing her beyond the limits of endurance. By the early morning hours, she was no longer responsive. Her breathing was shallow, her body still. Yet even then, help was not immediately summoned. Instead of calling emergency services, Santiago chose silence. It was Rodriguez himself who eventually contacted authorities, but by the time medical personnel arrived, Nixzmary was already dead. The autopsy revealed the full scope of what the child had endured, transforming the case from a tragic death into undeniable proof of prolonged torture. The official cause of death was determined to be blunt force trauma to the head, consistent with severe impact injuries. However, the examination uncovered far more than the fatal blow. Nixzmary's body showed clear signs of long-term starvation, dehydration, and physical restraint. Investigators documented marks indicating that she had been tied to a chair for extended periods, sometimes for hours at a time. Evidence suggested she was routinely denied access to the bathroom, forced to sit in her own waste as part of her punishment. These findings painted a picture not of a single night of violence, but of months of systematic abuse carried out with chilling regularity. As details emerged, public outrage grew rapidly. Media coverage exposed not only the brutality of the crime, but also the failures of the institutions meant to prevent it. New York City's Administration for Children's Services, ACS, came under intense scrutiny. Records revealed that the agency had received multiple reports concerning Nixzmary's welfare, including allegations of abuse and neglect. Caseworkers had visited the home, yet the child remained in the environment that ultimately killed her. Investigations into ACS practices uncovered missed warning signs, inadequate follow-up, and systemic shortcomings that allowed severe abuse to continue unchecked. The case became a symbol of institutional negligence, sparking citywide protests and demands for reform. For many New Yorkers, Nixzmary Brown's death represented the ultimate consequence of bureaucratic failure. The criminal proceedings that followed sought to address individual responsibility within this broader context of neglect. Cesar Rodriguez was charged and ultimately convicted of manslaughter. During the trial, prosecutors laid out a detailed timeline of abuse, supported by forensic evidence and witness testimony. The court heard how Rodriguez exercised absolute control over Nixzmary, using violence as a tool of domination. In sentencing, the judge emphasized the cruelty of the acts and the vulnerability of the victim. Rodriguez received a 29-year prison sentence, reflecting both the severity of the crime and the irreversible harm inflicted. His conviction acknowledged that while the charge was not murder, the actions leading to Nixzmary's death were inexcusable and brutal. Nixzaliz Santiago also faced justice for her role in the tragedy. Prosecutors argued that her failure to protect her daughter amounted to complicity in the abuse. Evidence demonstrated that she was aware of the violence, witnessed it firsthand, and yet chose not to intervene or seek help. The court agreed, concluding that her inaction directly contributed to her child's death. Santiago was sentenced to 43 years in prison, a punishment reflecting the moral and legal weight of a parent's duty to protect their child. The disparity between the sentences underscored the court's view that both active abuse and passive complicity were equally devastating in their consequences. Beyond the courtroom, the impact of Nixzmary Brown's death rippled through policy discussions and public consciousness. The case prompted internal reviews within ACS and led to changes in how child abuse reports were evaluated and escalated. Training protocols were revised, and new oversight mechanisms were introduced to reduce the likelihood of similar failures. Yet for many critics, these measures felt insufficient compared to the irreversible loss of a child's life. Advocacy groups argued that true reform required not just procedural adjustments, but a cultural shift toward prioritizing children's safety above administrative convenience. Today, Nixzmary Brown's name endures as more than a case file or a statistic. It has become a symbol of the consequences of silence, neglect, and delayed action. Her story is invoked in discussions about child welfare reform, serving as a reminder of what is at stake when warning signs are ignored. Each detail of her short life, from the bruises noticed by teachers to the final hours spent in fear, challenges society to confront uncomfortable truths about responsibility and accountability. The tragedy forces a reckoning with the reality that protection systems are only as effective as the people who operate them. In remembering Nixzmary, the focus is not solely on the brutality she suffered, but on the collective failure that allowed it to continue. Her death stands as a stark warning that abuse often hides in plain sight, masked by routine and overlooked by those who are overwhelmed, undertrained, or indifferent. The legacy of this case lies in its capacity to provoke change, to demand vigilance, and to insist that no report, no bruise, and no cry for help be dismissed as insignificant. Nixzmary Brown's life was brief, but the lessons drawn from her death continue to resonate, urging a society to do better, act faster, and never again allow a child to be lost to silence.